It was early morning in London, and the spring air carried that gentle chill which makes you pull your jacket a little tighter. Crowds were already starting to gather outside the gates of Buckingham Palace. Tourists from all over the world stood with their cameras, waiting for the famous sight everyone came to see, the royal guards in their tall black hats and red uniforms, standing as still as statues. Among the crowd was a young man named Ethan. He had just arrived from abroad 2 days ago and was traveling with a few of his friends. They were all in their early 20s, full of energy, always laughing and recording everything for their social media followers. For Ethan, this trip was supposed to be about fun and adventure, but deep down, he was chasing something else too. Attention. He wanted to go viral, to do something that people would talk about, something funny and bold. That morning, when his friend mentioned it was April Fool's Day, an idea immediately sparked in his head. "Imagine if I prank one of those guards," he said, pointing toward the soldiers standing motionless at their posts. "It'll be epic." His friends laughed, thinking he was joking, but Ethan wasn't. The thought stuck in his mind. Everyone knew the royal guards were famous for not reacting to anything. Videos online showed people trying to make them laugh or move, and the guards never even blinked. It fascinated him and tempted him. He wanted to see what would happen if he could get one to break character, even for a second. They moved closer to the palace gates, weaving through tourists holding flags and selfie sticks. The air buzzed with excitement, and somewhere behind them, a street musician was playing a soft tune on a violin. Ethan felt a rush of confidence. He pulled out his phone, handed it to his friend, and said, "Record everything." His friend hesitated. "You sure about this, man? There are signs everywhere saying not to touch or distract them." Ethan grinned. "I'm not going to touch anyone. It's just a joke. Come on, it's April Fool's Day." His friends exchanged looks but went along anyway. The camera started rolling. Ethan stepped forward until he was only a few feet from one of the guards. The soldier stood tall, expressionless, rifle at his side, eyes fixed straight ahead. His uniform was perfect, not a wrinkle in sight. The bright red coat almost glowed under the morning sun. Ethan waved his hand in front of the guard's face, trying to make him blink. Nothing. He moved to the side and started doing silly dances, spinning in circles, pretending to march next to him. People nearby began to laugh. A few tourists pulled out their phones to record. It looked harmless enough, just a young man being playful. But not everyone was amused. A mother with her kids frowned and whispered something about disrespect. A security officer in the distance glanced in their direction. Ethan didn't notice. The attention made him even bolder. He got down on one knee, pretending to tie his shoe. His friend kept filming. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small rubber snake he'd bought earlier from a souvenir shop. He placed it near the guard's boot, then jumped back dramatically, shouting, "Watch out, there's a snake!" The crowd gasped. For a second, the guard didn't move. Ethan burst out laughing, clutching his stomach as his friends joined in. It was the reaction he wanted. The crowd's eyes were all on him. The sound of laughter filling the air, but the laughter didn't last. The guard suddenly took one sharp step forward, his boot hitting the ground with force. The noise was so loud that several people in the front row jumped. Then came his voice, calm but powerful, the kind of voice that silenced everyone around. "Step back immediately," he commanded. The words cut through the laughter like a blade. Ethan froze. His grin disappeared. He wasn't expecting the guard to speak, let alone sound that serious. His friends stopped recording for a moment, unsure what to do. The guard didn't move again, but his presence alone was enough to make Ethan step backward. The crowd had gone completely quiet. You could hear the faint sound of traffic in the distance and the flutter of flags in the wind. A palace official who had been standing nearby started walking toward them, his face stern. Behind him, a police officer followed. Ethan's stomach sank. This wasn't part of the plan. He thought maybe they'd laugh it off or tell him to stop. But seeing those uniforms walking toward him made his chest tighten. The officer stopped a few feet away. "What's going on here?" he asked firmly. Ethan tried to smile. It was just a joke. A harmless prank. "I didn't mean any trouble." The officer's expression didn't change. "This is a place of official duty. These guards are not to be interfered with. You're lucky he didn't take action when you crossed the line." Ethan's friends tried to defend him, saying it was just for a video and no one got hurt. But the officer wasn't interested in excuses. He asked for Ethan's ID and told him to delete the video on the spot. The crowd around them began whispering, watching the scene unfold. Some were shaking their heads. Others quietly filmed from a distance. Ethan's hands trembled as he unlocked his phone. His friend whispered, "Dude, this is bad." As he scrolled through the video to delete it, Ethan caught a glimpse of his own face on the screen, laughing, pointing, mocking the guard who hadn't even flinched. Suddenly, he didn't feel so funny anymore. The laughter that had once filled his chest was replaced by embarrassment. He pressed delete. The officer made sure it was gone, then gave him a long look. "You're lucky this is ending here," he said. "If you try anything like that again, you could face serious charges." Ethan nodded quickly, murmuring apologies. His voice was quiet, almost shaky. The officer turned to the palace official and exchanged a few words before walking away. The crowd began to scatter, but a few people stayed back, whispering to each other. Ethan could feel their eyes on him. Every step he took away from the gate felt heavier than the last. When they finally reached the sidewalk, his friend tried to lighten the mood. "Well, that didn't go like we planned." Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the ground. The sound of the guard's voice still echoed in his mind, calm, firm, and full of authority. That single step forward had felt like a wall coming down between his childish joke and the real world. They walked to a nearby bench, and Ethan sat down. He pulled out his phone only to realize the screen had cracked, probably from when he dropped it earlier during the prank. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had come to make people laugh, but now he was the one being laughed at. A small boy nearby tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Why was that man making fun of the soldier?" The mother bent down and quietly explained that the guards were there to protect the palace and should be respected. Ethan heard every word. It stung more than he wanted to admit. His friend stopped joking after that. The energy that had filled the morning was gone. They decided to head somewhere else away from the palace. But as they walked away, Ethan couldn't stop glancing back at the guards, still standing tall, still silent, as if nothing had happened. He realized then that those men weren't just part of a show for tourists. They were real soldiers, disciplined and proud, serving their country in full view of people like him who often didn't understand the weight of what that meant. As they turned the corner, a gust of wind blew, scattering a few flyers from a nearby shop. One of them landed at Ethan's feet. It was an advertisement for guided tours about the history and duties of the Royal Guards. He bent down, picked it up, and read the words printed in bold letters: honor, duty, discipline. He stood there for a long moment, holding the flyer in silence. His friends called out to him, but he didn't move right away. The laughter, the crowd, the embarrassment, it all replayed in his mind like a movie he wished he could stop. That night back at his hotel, Ethan couldn't sleep. The glow of the city lights slipped through the window, painting faint lines across the ceiling. He scrolled through his social media feed where everyone else was still posting jokes and pranks for April Fool's Day. Normally, he would have joined in. But this time the thought made him uneasy. He had learned something that day, though he couldn't quite put it into words yet. Maybe it was about respect. Maybe it was about knowing when to draw the line. All he knew for sure was that the look on that guard's face, or rather, the stillness of it, would stay with him for a long time. He turned off his phone, lay back on the bed, and whispered to himself, "Maybe not all jokes are worth it." Then he closed his eyes, as the sound of the city faded into silence. The next morning, the city was quiet compared to the day before. A light drizzle covered the streets, and the sound of car tires on wet pavement echoed softly through London. Ethan sat by the hotel window with a cup of coffee in his hand, watching people hurry past with umbrellas. His friends were still asleep, scattered around the small room, their luggage half open and clothes tossed everywhere. He hadn't said much since the prank. The memory of the guard's commanding voice and the officer's serious face had stuck with him all night. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear the crowd's silence after his joke went wrong. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was guilt too. He didn't like how it had made him look. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. One of his friends had uploaded a short clip before the officer made them delete the full video. It wasn't the full prank, just the part where Ethan was dancing near the guard and the crowd laughing. It already had thousands of views overnight. Comments were pouring in. Some people laughed, but many weren't kind at all. Disrespectful. Tourists like this make us look bad. Why can't people show some respect? Ethan scrolled through them with a sinking feeling in his stomach. The video that was supposed to make him famous was now making him look foolish. His hands tightened around the phone. He wanted to tell people it wasn't what it looked like, but deep down he knew it was. By the time his friends woke up, he was already dressed. One of them yawned and asked, "You okay, man?" Ethan forced a small smile. "Yeah, I just need to clear my head." He didn't wait for their response. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. The air smelled of rain, and the clouds hung low over the city. He walked aimlessly, not really knowing where he was going. The streets were busy but calm. People heading to work, buses passing by, tourists snapping pictures near every old building. Eventually, his steps led him back toward Buckingham Palace. He stopped across the street, staring at the gates. The same guards stood there, unmoving, perfectly in line. New tourists had gathered with cameras, some whispering, some laughing, just like yesterday. But to Ethan, the scene looked different now. He leaned against the railing and watched quietly. The guards didn't flinch as people waved or posed near them. Their focus never wavered. It struck him how much discipline it must take to stand there for hours, rain or shine, with strangers constantly trying to make you react. For the first time, Ethan felt a kind of respect he hadn't felt before. It wasn't just about them being soldiers. It was about their strength, their patience, their calmness. As he watched, a small boy around 10 years old walked up close to one of the guards with his father. The boy saluted the soldier shyly, then smiled when the guard gave a tiny nod in return. The father took a photo, thanked the soldier quietly, and led his son away. That small moment touched Ethan more than he expected. He thought about the difference between what that boy had done and what he had done, respect versus mockery, appreciation versus attention-seeking. The realization stung a little, but it also woke something inside him. He pulled out his phone again, opened the video app, and hit delete. The clip his friend had posted was gone in seconds. He didn't care how many views it had. It didn't feel funny anymore. He turned away from the palace and started walking toward the nearby park. The drizzle had stopped, and the sun peeked faintly through the clouds. He found a quiet bench near a pond and sat down. Ducks glided across the water, and a few kids threw breadcrumbs, laughing as the birds rushed closer. For a while, he just sat there, breathing in the fresh air. Then unexpectedly, a voice beside him said, "You were the guy from yesterday, weren't you?" Ethan turned and saw a man in his 30s, dressed casually, holding a coffee cup. He had a friendly but knowing look. "I saw you at the palace," the man continued. "You were doing that prank." Ethan tensed up. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That was me." The man didn't scold him. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I used to be in the army," he said. "Didn't serve as a guard, but I worked with a few of them before I left. You know, people think those soldiers just stand there doing nothing, but they're trained to react if something serious happens. They're protecting history, people, and the royal grounds. It's not easy." Ethan listened, his eyes fixed on the pond. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone," he said softly. "It was supposed to be funny." "I get that," the man replied. "But sometimes what feels funny to us can look like something else to others. It's good you're thinking about it now. Most people wouldn't." The man stood up, finished his coffee, and tossed the cup in a nearby bin. "You seem like a good kid," he said before walking off. "Just remember, some lines aren't worth crossing for a laugh." Ethan watched him leave, feeling a strange mix of relief and regret. That short conversation hit him harder than he expected. He spent the rest of the day wandering through the city, avoiding his friends' calls. When he finally returned to the hotel, they were sitting around watching TV. One of them turned and said, "Dude, people online are still talking about you. Someone re-uploaded the video before you deleted it. It's everywhere now." Ethan's heart dropped. "What do you mean everywhere?" His friend showed him his phone. The video was on multiple pages shared by random accounts. It had even been reposted on a few travel pages with captions like "Tourist crosses the line" and "Why respect matters." The comments were worse than before. Some people mocked him, others criticized him harshly. A few said he deserved to be fined. Ethan felt his cheeks burn. It was one thing to embarrass himself in front of a crowd, but being judged by thousands of strangers online was something else entirely. He sat down and buried his face in his hands. His friends tried to comfort him, saying it would blow over soon. But he knew it wouldn't be that easy. The internet never forgets. Later that night, he went out for a walk again. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, and the air felt cooler. He walked without a destination, thinking about everything that had happened. He passed by a souvenir shop near the river and stopped in front of the window. There were postcards of Buckingham Palace, miniature guards, and small British flags lined up neatly on the shelves. He stepped inside. The shopkeeper, an older man with gray hair, greeted him with a smile. "Looking for something special?" he asked. Ethan hesitated, then picked up a small metal figure of a royal guard. "Just this," he said quietly. The shopkeeper nodded and wrapped it in paper. "They're quite popular," he said. "I used to see the guards every day on my way to work. Strong men, quiet but kind too. People don't realize how much they go through." Ethan paid and left, holding the small figure in his hand. It felt heavier than he expected. He turned it over, looking at the fine details of the uniform and the expressionless face. Somehow it didn't feel lifeless anymore. It felt symbolic, steady, patient, strong. He carried it all the way back to the hotel and placed it on the bedside table. His friends were asleep by then, the room dark except for the faint glow from the street outside. He lay down but didn't sleep right away. He kept looking at that tiny guard under the lamplight. For the first time, he saw it not as a joke or a costume, but as a symbol of duty. The word echoed in his head, duty. He thought about the man in the park, about the officer's voice, and about the silence of the crowd that day. It wasn't anger he felt anymore. It was understanding. He realized how small his joke had been in the bigger picture. He had treated something meaningful like a stage prop for his entertainment. And now he saw how wrong that was. Before closing his eyes, he whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll make it right somehow." He didn't know how yet, but he meant it. He wanted to do something, not for attention this time, but out of respect. As the city slept around him, the rain started again, tapping gently against the windows. Ethan drifted off with one thought repeating in his mind. Some lessons come quietly, but they change you forever. The next morning, the city was bright and calm. The rain had cleared overnight, leaving the streets shiny and fresh. The sound of distant buses mixed with the chatter of early tourists. Ethan woke up earlier than usual. His friends were still asleep, their phones buzzing with notifications. The video was still spreading online, and he didn't even want to check the comments anymore. He sat up slowly, staring at the small metal figure of the royal guard that he'd bought the night before. It stood upright on the bedside table, silent and steady. Something about that tiny figure made him think about everything differently. For the first time, he didn't feel angry at the people online. He felt disappointed in himself. He got dressed quietly and slipped out of the room, not wanting to wake anyone. Outside, the air was crisp and the sunlight bounced off the wet pavement. He walked toward the same area near Buckingham Palace, but this time he didn't go there to laugh or record anything. He just wanted to see things from another side. When he reached the gates, the crowd was already forming. Tourists leaned against the railings, snapping photos, laughing softly and whispering to each other. Ethan stood at the back, far enough that no one would notice him. He just watched. The guards were standing as still as ever, rifles at their sides, eyes fixed forward. The sight felt different now, calmer, almost peaceful. He saw a group of kids walking by with their teacher, learning about the palace and the guards' history. The teacher spoke about discipline, tradition, and pride. Ethan listened quietly, realizing how little he'd known before. He had thought of the guards as performers, not soldiers, but hearing their story made him understand they were part of something much bigger than a photo or a video. After a while, he walked over to a bench near the park across from the palace. He sat there for a long time, lost in thought. He wanted to apologize, to the guard, to the people he had embarrassed, maybe even to himself. But how could he? He didn't even know where to start. While he was sitting there, a woman in a bright yellow jacket stopped near him to feed the pigeons. She noticed the small souvenir soldier in his hand and smiled. "You like the guards?" she asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, I didn't before, but I do now." The woman laughed softly. "They grow on you, don't they? My brother used to be one years ago. Said it was the hardest thing he ever did, standing there for hours, not moving, not speaking, no matter what people said or did. He told me some people try to make them laugh or distract them. Some are rude, but most are just curious." Ethan looked down at the little figure in his hand. "I did something stupid," he admitted. I tried to prank one. I thought it was harmless, but it wasn't. Now everyone online's talking about it. The woman tilted her head. And what did you learn from it? He thought for a moment before answering. That some things deserve respect, and that attention isn't worth losing self-respect. She nodded kindly. That's a good lesson. We all mess up sometimes. What matters is what you do afterward. Her words stayed in his head long after she left. He decided then that he wasn't just going to sit and feel sorry for himself. He needed to make things right, even if no one noticed. That afternoon, he found a small flower shop near the corner of the main road. The place smelled of fresh roses and lavender. The shopkeeper greeted him warmly, and Ethan asked for a simple bouquet. Nothing fancy, just something respectful. He picked white flowers, thinking they looked peaceful. He walked back to the palace, holding the bouquet carefully. He didn't go too close to the guards, but he approached one of the palace officials standing nearby. The man recognized him immediately. You again, the official said, his tone firm but not angry this time. You're not planning another stunt, are you? Ethan shook his head quickly. No, sir. I came to apologize. I wanted to leave these flowers as a sign of respect, for the guard and for everyone who saw what I did. The official looked at him for a moment, studying his face. There was no sign of the cocky tourist from before, just a young man who genuinely looked sorry. The official's expression softened slightly. I'll make sure they're placed properly, he said, taking the bouquet. Thank you, Ethan said quietly. And please tell the guard I'm sorry. The official gave a small nod. I think he already knows. Ethan thanked him and stepped back. He didn't stay long after that. He didn't want attention. He just wanted peace. As he walked away, he felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. For the first time since the prank, he could breathe normally again. That evening, when he returned to the hotel, his friends were surprised. One of them asked, "Where were you all day?" Just walking, Ethan said simply. Thinking, his friend hesitated. People online are still talking about it. But some are saying you handled it well. Someone posted a picture of you giving flowers. People are calling it an apology. Ethan blinked. Someone took a photo? His friend nodded. Yeah, it's all over Twitter and a few blogs. Some people are saying it's good you owned up to it. Ethan smiled faintly. He hadn't planned for anyone to notice. For once, it didn't feel like fame. It felt like understanding. He didn't care about likes or comments anymore. He just wanted to move on, knowing he had tried to fix his mistake. Later that night, as the city lights shimmered outside, Ethan scrolled through his messages. There were mixed reactions, as always, but one caught his attention. It was a direct message from someone claiming to be a former guard. The message said, I saw what happened. You're not the first person to make that mistake, and you won't be the last. But you did something most don't. You made it right. Respect isn't about never making errors. It's about learning when you do. Ethan read the message twice, then smiled. It felt like closure. The next morning, he and his friends decided to visit some other parts of the city before heading home the following day. They visited museums, tried local food, and took photos like normal tourists. But even as he laughed and joked with his friends again, something inside him had changed. He wasn't the same person who had arrived in London a few days ago. He was quieter now, more observant, more aware of the people and traditions around him. Every time he passed by a guard or saw a flag flying high, he felt a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. When they finally packed up to leave, he picked up the small metal figure from the bedside table. He didn't want to leave it behind. He slipped it into his bag carefully. It wasn't just a souvenir anymore. It was a reminder of what he'd learned. At the airport, his friends teased him again, but this time the laughter was easy and harmless. He joined in, smiling. He felt like himself again, but a better version of himself, someone who understood a little more about the world. As the plane lifted off, he looked out the window at the city below. Buckingham Palace was just a small dot in the distance now, but in his mind he could still picture the guard standing tall and silent. He whispered quietly, "Thank you," though no one could hear him. When he landed back home, Ethan posted one last message online. Not a video, not a joke, but a reflection. He wrote, "A few days ago I made a mistake while trying to be funny. I disrespected someone who deserved respect. I've learned that some things are not for entertainment. They're meant to be honored. I'm sorry to anyone I offended. I'll remember this lesson for life. The post wasn't dramatic or emotional, but it was honest. To his surprise, people responded kindly. Some thanked him for owning up. Others shared their own stories about learning lessons in public. It didn't erase what happened, but it turned something embarrassing into something meaningful. That night, before going to bed, he placed the little soldier figure on his desk. He looked at it and smiled. It was strange how something so small could hold such a big story. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could live differently from now on. And that was enough. As he turned off the lights, he thought about how sometimes life teaches you lessons in the most unexpected ways, like a prank gone wrong on April Fool's Day that turned into one of the most humbling experiences of his life. He closed his eyes, grateful that karma hadn't come to destroy him. It had come to teach him. The next day, Ethan woke with a restless feeling. Even though he had learned a lot over the past few days, a small part of him was still uneasy. He had done the right thing by apologizing and leaving flowers at the palace, but a part of him kept thinking about the moment when he had pranked the guard. The memory of the officer's stern voice and the guard's silent authority was still fresh in his mind. It had been humbling, and now he couldn't stop thinking about the consequences of carelessness and how quickly things could go wrong. He left his hotel early before his friends woke up and decided to revisit the palace one more time. Not to prank, not to record, not even to take photos, but just to observe. The streets were already busy with tourists, but there was a certain calmness in the morning air that made the city feel more alive. Ethan walked slowly, taking in the sights, sounds, and smells of London. The crisp morning air carried a mixture of baked goods from nearby cafes, wet cobblestones from last night's rain, and the faint hum of traffic in the distance. When he reached the palace, a crowd had already gathered. Tourists waved their phones and cameras, hoping for a chance to capture the perfect photo of the guards. Ethan stayed back, careful to remain unnoticed. He watched the soldiers stand perfectly still, unmoving and silent, as tourists got close, posed, and sometimes shouted jokes. None of it affected the guards. They were like statues, but more impressive, more alive than any statue he had ever seen. A few children approached with their parents, asking questions about the soldiers. Ethan overheard the parents explaining about the guards' training, discipline, and role in history. He noticed the children were careful, respectful, and curious. Their laughter wasn't mocking. It was innocent, full of wonder. Ethan realized how different that was from his behavior just a few days ago. He had crossed a line, seeking attention and fun at the expense of someone else's dignity. Watching the children made him feel a deep shame for what he had done, but also a desire to understand and respect the soldiers more. Ethan wandered toward a quieter side of the palace grounds, where fewer tourists gathered. He spotted a small cafe nearby and decided to sit for a while. He ordered a simple tea and took a seat by the window, looking out at the palace gates. From there, he could see a guard standing under the sun, rifle at his side, eyes forward, completely focused. Ethan's gaze lingered on him, and he noticed something new. The guard's posture, the calm strength, the dedication in every movement. It wasn't just discipline, it was pride. Ethan thought back to his prank, the rubber snake, the dancing, the laughter of his friends. It had seemed funny in the moment, but now it felt foolish, reckless, and selfish. He realized that people, like the guards who give themselves to a duty far larger than themselves, deserved something better than mockery. They deserved respect, silence, and appreciation, even if it wasn't obvious to everyone. As he sat there, lost in thought, a group of tourists tried to sneak past the railings to get closer to the guards. A police officer quickly stepped in, guiding them back and explaining the rules. Ethan felt a pang of empathy for the officer, understanding how often they must deal with people who don't think before acting. He thought about his own behavior, how it had caused tension and drawn unwanted attention. The officer's patience in dealing with hundreds of careless tourists suddenly seemed admirable, and Ethan silently thanked him for helping maintain order and respect. Feeling restless, Ethan stood and decided to walk around the perimeter of the palace grounds. He wanted to see how everything worked beyond the gates. On his walk, he noticed a man sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons and reading a book. Ethan hesitated for a moment before approaching him. The man looked up and smiled. "You seem thoughtful," he said gently. "Visiting the palace?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I made a mistake here a few days ago. I pranked one of the guards." He paused, unsure if he should continue. "It was supposed to be funny, but it wasn't. I embarrassed myself and probably others too." The man chuckled softly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that you recognize it. You're here, observing, reflecting, not repeating it." That says a lot. Ethan listened, absorbing every word. I feel like I didn't respect them before. And now I want to, but it's hard. People online are still talking about it, making jokes, criticizing me. I feel like I can't undo it." The man nodded knowingly. "You can't change the past, but you can change how you act now. Respect isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about learning and showing it when you can. Look at the guards, they stand there calm no matter what. That's their lesson to you." Ethan stared at the palace gates, thinking about what the man said. There was truth in it. The guards hadn't reacted to him when he had pranked them. They didn't yell, they didn't strike back. They stood silent, disciplined, and professional. That had been the most powerful response of all. The officers had handled the situation swiftly and firmly, and Ethan had learned his lesson through embarrassment and reflection. As he walked back toward the palace, a sudden noise caught his attention. A young child had tripped on the cobblestones near the gates. Before anyone could react, one of the guards stepped slightly forward, not aggressively, not angrily, but carefully, with just enough movement to be ready if needed. The officer nearby rushed over to help the child, and the parents thanked him. Ethan noticed how the guard's attention had shifted in an instant, professional and controlled, ready to act if necessary. It reminded him that their stillness was not weakness. It was discipline and readiness. Ethan sat on a bench nearby, watching quietly. The crowd around him continued to snap photos and chatter, but he no longer felt the desire to be part of it. He realized he had been seeking attention, but the attention he wanted so badly didn't compare to the quiet dignity of the guards. Their value wasn't in making people laugh. It was in serving their duty with pride and patience. After a while, he spotted the officer who had scolded him on the first day. The man was speaking with tourists, answering questions politely, guiding people, and maintaining calm. Ethan felt a strange mix of respect and shame. He understood the weight of responsibility these people carried daily. They dealt with crowds, disrespect, and chaos while maintaining order and safety. His prank had been a disruption, and seeing the officer calmly handle situations reminded him of the difference between childish mischief and real responsibility. The day passed slowly. Ethan didn't take any photos, he didn't attempt any jokes. He simply observed, reflected, and learned. He noticed small details. The way the guards' boots stayed perfectly polished, the way their eyes scanned the crowd subtly, the faint but steady breathing that kept them grounded. It all spoke of training, focus, and commitment. When the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Ethan decided to leave. As he walked away, he realized something important. He could not erase the past, but he could carry these lessons forward. Respect, humility, patience, and understanding were far more valuable than attention, laughter, or social media fame. Back at the hotel, he placed the small guard figure on his desk, staring at it for a long time. It had transformed in his eyes from a souvenir into a symbol of all he had learned. He thought about the embarrassment, the scolding, the public attention, and the quiet lessons he had witnessed. Each moment had contributed to a larger understanding of respect, duty, and responsibility. That evening, Ethan pulled out his journal. He wrote about the past few days not as a story to impress others, but as a personal record of reflection. He detailed the prank, the reaction, his emotions, and the lessons learned. Writing helped him process the experience fully, turning humiliation into growth. Later, he called his parents, explaining what had happened honestly without sugarcoating. They listened, and though they were initially disappointed, they also praised him for owning up to his mistake and learning from it. Ethan felt a deep sense of relief. He wasn't just apologizing to strangers or officers, he was acknowledging his own growth. That night, he lay in bed, thinking about the guards standing tall at the palace. Their silence had taught him more than any lecture, any comment online, or any scolding ever could. It had been a humbling experience, one that would stay with him for life. He realized that true respect doesn't come from applause or attention. It comes from understanding, patience, and quiet reflection. As he drifted off to sleep, he felt ready for whatever came next. Karma had already shown him its power, not through punishment but through lessons and self-awareness. And Ethan knew that from now on, he would approach life, people, and responsibilities differently, with more care, respect, and thoughtfulness than ever before. The morning sun filtered gently through the hotel curtains, painting the room in soft golden light. Ethan woke feeling a calm he hadn't felt in days. He stretched and glanced at the little metal guard on his desk. Its painted red coat and tall black hat seemed to shine in the morning light. But more importantly, it reminded him of everything he had learned on this trip. Respect, patience, humility, and the quiet weight of responsibility. His friends were already up, chatting and packing for their flight later in the day. Ethan smiled faintly at them. He had joined in the laughter the night before, but it was different now, genuine, without the restless energy that had driven him to prank the guard in the first place. He had changed, and he could feel it. Before checking out, Ethan wanted to make one final stop at Buckingham Palace. He didn't tell his friends. He didn't need them to witness it. This time he was alone. He walked calmly through the streets, the city alive with tourists, street performers, and the soft hum of early traffic. He reached the palace gates, and the familiar sight of the royal guards greeted him. They stood tall and still, as always, their presence commanding attention without a word. Ethan stopped across the street and watched quietly. There were tourists snapping photos, children pointing excitedly, and a few people trying to get closer than they should. He noticed a small boy saluting a guard politely and smiling when the soldier nodded slightly in return. The scene made Ethan smile too. He could now see the beauty of respect and admiration, the way it could be quiet and powerful, rather than loud and attention-seeking. He thought back to his own actions, the prank with the rubber snake, the dancing, the laughter that had turned to silence. The embarrassment he had felt then now seemed like a lesson in disguise. He realized how quickly attention could turn from fun to shame, and how easily people could cross lines they shouldn't. That moment had changed him, and he knew it. As he stood there, a familiar officer appeared, patrolling the area and keeping an eye on the crowd. Ethan felt a pang of nervousness, but quickly reminded himself he had done everything he could to make amends. The officer noticed him, but only gave a brief nod before continuing his duty. Ethan returned the nod, silently acknowledging the respect he now felt for those who served. Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out the small bouquet of white flowers he had brought. It had wilted a little over the days, but it still looked peaceful and respectful. He stepped closer to the official at a safe distance and handed the bouquet over. "Please," he said quietly, "could you give these to the guard? As a thank you and to show respect." The officer looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "I will," he said, pocketing the flowers carefully. "You've learned something important, and it shows. That's what matters." Ethan stepped back, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He didn't need anyone to cheer or take photos. This act wasn't for attention. It was about closure, about respect, and about the lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. He lingered for a few more minutes, watching the guards and the tourists around him. A group of schoolchildren passed by, asking questions about the soldiers and the palace. Ethan smiled, remembering how innocent their curiosity was. He realized how small his joke had been in comparison to the bigger picture of discipline, service, and honor. After a while, he turned and walked away, feeling lighter than he had in days. The lesson was complete, and he carried it with him, not as guilt but as understanding. On the way back to the hotel, he saw a street musician playing a soft tune on a violin. He stopped briefly to listen, closing his eyes and letting the music settle his thoughts. It felt like a moment of quiet celebration, not for him but for the realization that he had grown. Back at the hotel, he packed his things and prepared to leave. His friends were chatting excitedly about the flight, taking selfies and making plans for the next trip. Ethan joined in with a smile, but his mind was calm, reflective. The social media comments, the embarrassment, the online attention, all of it now felt distant and unimportant. What mattered was what he had learned and how he would carry it forward. At the airport, as they waited for their flight, Ethan pulled out his phone and posted one final message. It wasn't a joke, it wasn't a viral attempt. It was simple, honest, and heartfelt. I learned an important lesson on this trip. Some things deserve respect. Some moments are bigger than a laugh, bigger than attention. I am grateful for the experience and the people who showed me the meaning of patience, discipline, and honor. He didn't expect much, but over the next few hours, messages came in from friends, strangers, and even people who had seen his prank. Many praised him for acknowledging his mistake and sharing the lesson. Some said they had learned from him too. Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride but peace. He knew he had handled the situation as best as he could. During the flight home, he stared out the window at the clouds, thinking about how quickly life could teach a lesson. A moment of foolishness had turned into a story of growth, respect, and humility. He reflected on the officer's calm authority, the guard's discipline, the street musician's gentle music, the conversation with the man feeding pigeons, and the little boy saluting the soldier. Every small encounter had contributed to a larger understanding. He also thought about his friends who had laughed and recorded the prank without thinking. He realized he could forgive them, just as he had forgiven himself. The lesson wasn't about blame. It was about learning. He made a mental note to share what he had learned with them, hoping they would carry it forward too. Once home, life returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of London and the guards stayed with him. He put the small metal soldier on his desk at home, next to his books, and it became a daily reminder. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the lesson about respect, patience, and the importance of thinking before acting. Months passed, but the story didn't leave him. Every time he saw a disciplined professional, a teacher, a police officer, a nurse, he thought about the guards and the lessons they had silently taught him. He also noticed how easy it was to seek attention without considering the consequences. He became more thoughtful, more careful, and more aware of the people around him. Ethan also told the story to friends and family, not as a boast, but as a cautionary tale. He described the embarrassment, the online attention, the conversation with the former soldier, and the quiet strength of the guards. People listened, laughed at the foolishness of it, but also respected the way he had taken responsibility. Many admitted that they might have done the same thing if caught up in the excitement of the moment. The story eventually became a memory that carried more than humor. It carried a lesson. Whenever someone mentioned pranks, April Fools, or funny travel videos, Ethan thought back to the day he pranked a royal guard and learned about humility, discipline, and respect in the process. He never forgot the exact moment karma struck, not as punishment but as a lesson. The embarrassment, the officer's stern words, the crowd's silence, and the broken phone, it all served to show him that actions have consequences, and respect is earned, not demanded. Years later, Ethan would sometimes pass by a royal guard at another location or see a ceremonial post, and he would smile quietly. Not because of the prank, not because of attention, but because of what he had learned. The guards had taught him more than any video comment or viral moment could ever teach. They had taught him about patience, discipline, humility, and the quiet power of respect. In the end, what started as a silly April Fool's prank turned into a life lesson. Ethan had sought attention and laughter, but he left with understanding and growth. Karma had not humiliated him forever. It had guided him to see the value of respect, the importance of responsibility, and the power of quiet strength. And every time he looked at the small metal soldier on his desk, he smiled, knowing that the lesson would never leave him. It was a prank that backfired, a moment of embarrassment that turned into wisdom, and a reminder that sometimes life teaches you the hardest lessons in the simplest ways. Ethan never forgot it, and he carried it with him, quietly and proudly for the rest of his life.